lot of what you heard from Victor. More patients are surviving, and they are surviving with their stroke-induced deficits. And what that means is that we have millions of patients that are in what we refer to as the chronic stage of stroke. Their rehabilitation is plateaued, their insurance is given out, and they have a deficit that affects, for the purposes of this talk, we're going to stay laser focused on motor, especially motor recovery of the upper extremity. And when I talk about recovery, what I mean is a true recovery of function, a reduction in deficits, a restitution of the kinematics, and not compensation. The idea is that there is some manner of plasticity that has changed the motor output pathways post as compared to pre-stroke. Our gold standard of intervention, standard occupational therapy, physical therapy post-stroke, 15 prospective rehab trials over 4 years, all of which were no better than standard outcomes, all except for one, which used cerebrovascular. We're going to come back to that at the end. And those of you that work with stroke patients know this. Patients get better. Well, early recovery is that it is probably related to a process that we refer to as spontaneous recovery. The odds of spontaneous recovery affecting your true function recovery is quite high. If you had a drug, for example, if you had a pharmacologic intervention that wasn't working, you might consider dose. Are we dosing it wrong? Are we timing it wrong? Can we do something different? And indeed, people have looked at this in stroke rehabilitation. What about timing? I've already shown that there's an early time period of recovery. What if we offered things earlier, especially earlier in this time period? And again, I and others have shown that there is an important period of time that we can act on early. Can we take what we've learned in these human trials that did not show a change? Can we take what we've learned from the preclinical animal data and say, it looks like if we get increased dose at the right time, but in a non-structured, better way, we might be able to, this is what we want. Post-stroke, we would love for our patients to get better at everything, is on one thing. We're falling victim to a classic logical fallacy that correlation does not equal covariation. We know, for example, that height and weight covary, but that doesn't mean that if I pack on 100 pounds, I'm going to get taller. Nevertheless, we tend to rehabilitate patients in this same way. Actually enhance this spontaneous recovery that we know is one of the most efficacious forms of post-stroke recovery. And if we want our patients to get better at everything, I see two ways to do this. One way is to take these task-based mechanisms and train patients on 1,000 different tasks. There's probably not enough time in the day to do that. We're probably going to have that window of opportunity closed down. The other way is enriched environments. Just by exposing animals to an enriched environment, they were able to do things that they were never trained on and do it better than animals that did receive training. What is an enriched environment for humans? What I've shown here in the picture is not an enriched environment. Alone, in bed, not moving. At Johns Hopkins, we've taken advantage of our in-house video game company, Kata. Kata is a group of biostatisticians, engineers, video game manufacturers, computer scientists, and programmers to make an enriched virtual environment for patients in which they can embody Bandit the dolphin. They're able to become this dolphin and explore in a non-task-based way using the elimination of gravity through a number of different means, explore the ocean, get feedback on how they're doing. And this is a patterned, feedback-driven, non-task-based system. And this led to the SMARTS 2 trial, which is now published and indeed has shown some data. If we can enrich the external environment through things like what I just showed you, can we also enrich the internal environment? Is the one positive trial that came out of the last 4 years, at least between 2016 and 2019, and that is, could cerebrovascular play a role here? that if we train animals early after stroke, we can get them back almost to 100% function. Early and intense after stroke, we can get them back to function. If we don't train them and we don't give them any pharmacologic support, they don't get better. If we don't train them and give them fluoxetine, they don't get better. If we train them with fluoxetine, they do get better. But what was fascinating and quite surprising was that even without training, if they received cerebrolysin early after stroke, they showed spontaneous recovery. That is to say, recovery in the absence of any motor training. And this was recovery that generalized to a task that they received no training on during their recovery period. Patients receiving cerebrolysin indeed seem to have changes in their cortical spinal tract after stroke. Right now, guidelines include formal guidelines in Austria, formal guidelines in Germany, and a formal 1A recommendation in motor functions in Canada, which means that patients post-stroke are directed to receive cerebrolysin because of these data. Is that we're not there yet. We have a lot of work to do, but we think that we have a handle on where we should go. And one of those things is an enriched environment, getting patients to move more at the right time, and not forgetting about how we might be able to enhance not only the external and behavioral environment, but also the internal environment